The map was wrong. Sergeant First Class Teresa Whitford saw, at the moment Captain Soren pinned the satellite imagery to the board, saw the gap in the terrain analysis that would funnel 12 men into a kill zone with no cover for 200 meters. She had seen enough soldiers die in places just like it. The ridgeline they planned to cross at 0300 had a shadow on its eastern face, a shadow that meant elevation, that meant rock formations, that meant perfect firing positions for anyone waiting above. But when she opened her mouth to speak, Senior Chief Petty Officer Damon Krull was already talking, his voice filling the plywood operations center like he owned every molecule of air inside it. Before we continue with what happened next, drop a comment and let us know what state you're watching from. Maybe you have witnessed someone whose expertise was ignored where you are from. Whitford had arrived at FOB Toulon 3 days earlier, attached to the SEAL element for Overwatch support on a high-value target mission. 3 days of being looked through like she was made of glass. 3 days of her spotter, Staff Sergeant Micah Trenery, telling her to let it go, that they would be gone soon enough. But Trenery was not in this briefing. Only she was standing against the back wall while 8 SEALs and their commander planned an operation that was going to get people killed. Senior Chief Krull traced his finger along the approach route, explaining fields of fire and breach points to men who had heard it all before. He was good at this, Whitford admitted. Confident. The kind of operator who had done enough missions to trust his instincts completely. The problem was that his instincts were wrong. She waited for him to finish. She knew better than to interrupt. When he stepped back from a map, she raised her hand like she was back in basic training, hating herself for the gesture even as she made it. Krull's eyes found her with the enthusiasm of a man discovering something unpleasant on the bottom of his boot. Yes, Sergeant. Whitford stepped forward, keeping her voice level. The eastern approach, Senior Chief. That ridgeline at grid reference 47. The satellite imagery shows elevation changes that are not reflected in the terrain model. If there are defensive positions in those rocks, the assault element will be exposed during the crossing. Krull stared at her for a long moment. Then he smiled, but there was nothing friendly in it. When I want input from a POG with a rifle, I will ask for it. The terrain has been analyzed by people who have actually operated in this valley. Multiple times. The dismissal landed like a slap. Around the room, SEALs shifted in their seats or studied their boots. Commander Vincent Hale, a weathered African-American officer with 20 years of special operations behind his eyes, watched the exchange without expression. Whitford felt the heat climbing her neck but kept her voice steady. I have operated in terrain like this for 3 deployments, Senior Chief. I'm telling you what I see. And I'm telling you, Krull said, stepping closer, that your job is to sit on a rock half a click out and shoot who we tell you to shoot. Planning is not your concern. The room went quiet. Whitford could feel every eye on her, could feel the weight of the judgment, the assumptions, the same wall she had been hitting her entire career. She thought about pushing back. She thought about the men who would walk into that kill zone in 36 hours. She thought about the last Army sniper attached to this team, the one nobody talked about. Understood, Senior Chief, she said. Krull held her gaze a moment longer, making sure she knew who had won, then turned back to the map. Now, as I was saying, the breach team will stack on the north wall, while Sniper Overwatch confirms. Whitford returned to her position against the wall. Her hands were steady. Her face was blank. Inside, something cold was settling in her chest, the same feeling she got when she knew a shot was going to be difficult, when the math said it was possible, but the margin said it would cost her everything if she missed. Commander Hale dismissed the briefing 20 minutes later. Whitford was the first one out the door, moving through the cold mountain air toward the tent she shared with Trenery. She needed to look at that imagery again. She needed to be wrong. She was almost there when footsteps crunched on the gravel behind her. Sergeant Whitford. She turned. Captain Rebecca Soren stood in the dim light between structures, tablet tucked under her arm, Israeli accent softening consonants that American intelligence officers usually hammered flat. The captain's face was difficult to read. For what it is worth, Soren said quietly, I saw what you saw in that imagery. Whitford felt something loosen slightly in her chest. Then why did you not say something? Soren's smile was thin and tired. Because they do not listen to me either. Trenery was cleaning his spotting scope when Whitford pushed through the tent flap. He took one look at her face and set the scope down. That bad, he said. Whitford dropped onto her cot and stared at the canvas ceiling. The senior chief thinks I should stick to shooting who they tell me to shoot. Planning is above my pay grade. Trenery snorted. Krull has been running his mouth since we got here. Half his team is embarrassed by him, and the other half is too junior to say anything. She turned her head to look at him. The intelligence officer saw it too. The flaw in the approach. She told me after the briefing. Then why did she not back you up in the room? Because they do not listen to her either. Trenery was quiet for a moment. He had been with Whitford for 3 deployments now, had watched her make shots that other snipers called impossible, had seen her read terrain like other people read street signs. He knew what she was capable of. He also knew what the military was capable of doing to people who did not fit the expected mold. Show me, he said. Show me what you saw. They spent the next hour going over the satellite imagery on Whitford's tablet, tracing elevation lines and shadow patterns. Trenery saw it once she pointed it out, the way the eastern ridge created a natural amphitheater effect, the way anyone positioned in those rocks would have overlapping fields of fire on the approach route. If they have even 2 PCAM positions up there, Trenery said slowly, the assault element is walking into a meat grinder. Whitford nodded, and Krull will not listen. So what do we do? Whitford did not answer. She was thinking about Firebase Keating, about the valley in Nuristan, where she had spent 19 hours on a rifle providing overwatch while Rangers fought for their lives below. She had made shots that day. She still was not sure how she made. Instinct taking over when the math ran out. 14 confirmed kills and a bronze star she never talked about. She was thinking about how none of that mattered to men like Krull. We do our job, she finally said. We position for Overwatch, and we keep them alive despite themselves. The next morning, Whitford was at the range before dawn. The FOB had a makeshift facility carved into the mountainside, nothing fancy, just a few lanes and targets set at various distances. She needed to clear her head, needed to feel the rifle settle into the pocket of her shoulder and remember why she did this. She was on her 10th round when she heard boots on gravel behind her. Senior Chief Krull stood at the entrance to the range, arms crossed, watching her with an expression that hovered between amusement and contempt. 2 of his operators flanked him, younger men whose names she had not bothered to learn. Practicing, Krull said. Good. Maybe you will actually be useful out there. Whitford saved her weapon and turned to face him. I'm always useful, Senior Chief. Something flickered in Krull's eyes. He walked to the lane beside her, drawing his sidearm with practiced ease. You know what I think, Sergeant? I think you Army snipers spend so much time lying in the dirt, playing the long game, that you forget what real combat looks like. He fired 3 rounds in rapid succession, all center mass on the 50-meter target. His men nodded appreciatively. Whitford said nothing. She simply turned back to her lane, raised her rifle, and put 3 rounds through the same hole at 300 meters. The grouping was tight enough to cover with a quarter. Krull's jaw tightened. Parlor tricks. That is what that is. Anyone can shoot paper. One of the younger SEALs, a compact operator with Nigerian features and intelligent eyes, was staring at Whitford's target with something like respect. She filed that away for later. Krull holstered his weapon. Do not forget your place out there, Sergeant. Your support. Nothing more. He left without waiting for a response. His men followed, though the young Nigerian operator glanced back once before disappearing around the corner. Trenery appeared a few minutes later, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to Whitford and looked downrange at her target. Let me guess, he said. Krull came to remind you that SEALs are better than everyone. Something like that. And you reminded him that you can shoot. Whitford took a sip of the coffee. It was terrible, the instant kind that tasted like burnt cardboard, but it was warm. I probably should not have. Trenery shrugged. Man has been wrong about you since the moment we landed. Might as well give him evidence. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the sun climb over the mountains. Somewhere in those peaks, the high-value target they had come for was planning his next attack. 3 American service members had already died because of him. An IED that killed 2 soldiers on patrol. A mortar attack that caught a helicopter crew during refuel. The intelligence said he was coordinating supply lines, weapons, fighters flowing across the border. He needed to be stopped. Whitford understood that. She understood the mission. What she did not understand was why the men responsible for stopping him refused to listen to the one person who could see the danger waiting in the dark. That night, she dreamed of Firebase Keating. She dreamed of the sound of PKM fire echoing off valley walls, of the smell of cordite and blood, of a young ranger screaming for his mother while she searched for the shooter who had hit him. She found the target, took the shot, watched him drop. It was never enough. It was never fast enough. Someone always died while she was looking for the next threat. She woke before dawn, drenched in sweat, and knew that sleep was done for the night. Whitford found Captain Soren in the intelligence section at 0500, hunched over a laptop with 3 monitors arranged around her like a shrine to information. The Israeli officer looked up when Whitford entered, and something in her expression said she had been expecting this visit. "I need the latest imagery," Whitford said. "Everything from the last 72 hours. Soren studied her for a moment. "You are not going to let this go, would you?" Soren almost smiled. She pulled a chair over and gestured for Whitford to sit. The screens flickered as she brought up files, satellite passes and drone footage, and thermal imaging that painted the target compound in ghostly shades of heat and cold. For the next hour, they worked through the data together. Soren asked questions that proved she understood terrain analysis better than anyone Whitford had met outside the sniper community. Former IDF, Whitford remembered. These people have been fighting in mountains and deserts for generations. "There," Whitford said, pointing to a shadow on the thermal scan. "That heat signature. It is not geological." Soren leaned closer. "Could be an animal. Goats are common in these elevations." At 2 in the morning. Stationary for 6 hours. In a position with perfect line of sight on the approach route. Soren was quiet. Her fingers moved across the keyboard, pulling up more images, cross-referencing timestamps. When she finally spoke, her voice was carefully neutral. "I count 3 anomalies consistent with what you're describing. Possibly 4. For potential fighting positions. Exactly where Whitford had said they would be. I need to bring this to Commander Hale," Whitford said. Soren shook her head. Hale defers to Krull on tactical matters. "The senior chief has run more operations in this valley than anyone. Hale trusts his judgment. His judgment is going to get people killed. Maybe." Soren turned to face her fully. "But you are an army sergeant attached to a SEAL element for one mission. Krull is his senior NCO. Who do you think he's going to believe?" Whitford felt the familiar frustration rising in her chest, the same wall she had been hitting since the day she enlisted. She thought about walking away, about doing her job, and keeping her mouth shut and letting these men learn the hard way. She thought about the Rangers at Firebase Keating, the ones who did not come home. "Request a meeting," she said, "with Commander Hale. Tell him I have new intelligence that affects the operation." Soren held her gaze for a long moment. Then she reached for the radio. Commander Hale received them in his quarters 30 minutes later. The space was Spartan, a cot and a footlocker and a small desk covered in maps. Hale listened without interruption as Whitford walked him through the imagery, the heat signatures, the tactical implications. When she finished, Hale rubbed his jaw thoughtfully. "You're telling me you think there's an ambush waiting at the crossing point. I am telling you the evidence suggests prepared defensive positions with overlapping fields of fire on our approach route. Whether it is a deliberate ambush or standing security, the result is the same. The assault element will be exposed. Senior Chief Krull has operated in this AO for 18 months, Hale said slowly. He knows this terrain. Whitford kept her voice level. With respect, Commander, the terrain does not care how long anyone has been looking at it. It only cares about elevation and angles and where the bullets go. The door opened behind her. Krull stepped in, his face tight with controlled anger. Someone want to tell me why the intelligence officer is calling meetings about my operation without informing me? Hale raised a hand. Stand down, Senior Chief. Sergeant Whitford brought some concerns about the approach route. I wanted to hear them. Concerns. Kroll moved to stand beside Hale, looking down at the imagery spread across the desk. She has been here 3 days, and she has concerns about an operation I have been planning for 2 months. Whitford met his glare without flinching. When your element crosses that ridgeline at 0300, they will have at least 3 PCAM positions with interlocking fire. No cover for 200 meters. You will lose men. The silence stretched tight as piano wire. Kroll's face had gone red, a vein pulsing in his temple. You want to tell me my business, Sergeant? You want to stand there in my commander's quarters and tell me I do not know how to run an operation? I want to keep your men alive. Kroll stepped closer, close enough that Whitford could smell the coffee on his breath. If you're so worried about safety, maybe sniper support is not the right role for you. Maybe you should have stayed at whatever FOB you came from, counting your confirmed kills and pretending that makes you an operator. Kommandant Halistut. That is enough. Both of you. The room went quiet. Hale looked at the imagery, then at Whitford, then at Kroll. His expression was impossible to read. The mission proceeds as planned, he said finally. But Sergeant Whitford, you may position your sniper team however you see fit. If you believe you need a different angle, take it. It was not enough. It was nowhere close to enough. But it was something. Understood, Commander, Whitford said. Kroll said nothing. He did not have to. The look he gave her as she left said everything. Outside, the mountain air bit at her exposed skin. Trenery was waiting by their tent, reading her expression with the ease of long partnership. How bad, he said. Whitford looked up at the peaks surrounding the FOB, at the shadows pooling in the valleys where men were waiting to kill Americans. We are moving our position, she said. Not where Kroll assigned us. Trenery raised an eyebrow. That is a good way to end up in front of a disciplinary board. If I am wrong, I will take the court-martial. If I am right, I will take the bodies. She did not wait for his response. There was equipment to pack and a new position to scout, and somewhere in the darkness, a clock was ticking toward 0300. They moved out at 2100, 3 hours before the SEAL element would begin their approach. The mountain was different at night. The familiar terrain transformed into something alien and hostile. Whitford led the way with Trenery close behind, both of them carrying enough equipment to survive 48 hours without resupply. The position Kroll had assigned them was a rocky shelf 600 meters from the target compound. Adequate elevation, decent concealment, standard sniper placement. It was exactly where any competent enemy would expect Overwatch to be. Whitford had chosen somewhere else entirely. The climb took 2 hours. The route she had mapped from satellite imagery wound through a narrow ravine and up a shale face that required them to cache their heaviest gear and return for it twice. By the time they reached the outcropping she had identified, Trenery was breathing hard and his hand was scraped raw from the rock. You really know how to show a guy a good time, he muttered, settling into position beside her. Whitford was already scanning through her scope. The view from here was different than Kroll's assigned position. Wider. She could see the entire eastern ridge, the approach route the SEALs would take, and the compound beyond. More importantly, she could see the shadows and the rocks above the crossing point. The shadows that were not empty. Got movement, she said quietly. Eastern ridge, bearing 047. 2 figures, maybe 3. Trenery adjusted his spotting scope. I see them. They're setting up something. Looks like a tripod mount. PKM, just like she had warned them. They watched in silence as the enemy fighters prepared their position. More movement appeared further along the ridge. Another team carrying ammunition crates to a second location. The ambush was real. It was happening. And in 4 hours, 12 SEALs were going to walk directly into it. Whitford keyed her radio. Overwatch 1 to TOC, requesting Commander Hale. Static hissed for a long moment. Then a voice that was not Hale's. Overwatch 1, this is TOC. Commander Hale is in final mission brief. What is your traffic? She recognized the voice. One of Kroll's men, running the Tactical Operations Center. I have eyes on enemy activity at the eastern ridge. At least 2 fighting positions being established overlooking the approach route. Recommend immediate mission delay for reassessment. The pause stretched longer than it should have. When the response came, the operator's tone had shifted. Overwatch 1, confirm your current position. She gave him the grid coordinates. More silence. Overwatch 1, be advised you are not at assigned position. Stand by for Senior Chief. Trenery looked at her. Here we go. Krull's voice came through the radio like a blade. Sergeant Whitford, you want to explain why you are a kilometer away from where I told you to be? Senior Chief, I have visual confirmation of enemy positions at the Eastern Ridge. Multiple fighting positions with crew-served weapons. The approach route is compromised. You have visual confirmation. Through the dark. At that distance. Whitford felt her jaw tighten. I have night optics and 15 years of experience reading terrain. I'm telling you what I see, and I am telling you to relocate to your assigned position immediately. That is a direct order. The connection cut before she could respond. Trenery let out a slow breath. So that went well. Whitford did not move. She stayed locked on the scope, watching the enemy fighters complete their preparations. 2 positions confirmed now, possibly a third further west. Interlocking fields of fire. Professional setup. Whoever was running this ambush knew exactly what they were doing. What are you going to do? Trenery asked. My job. Your job according to Krull, or your job according to you. Whitford finally looked away from the scope. In the dim light, her face was unreadable. My job is to keep those men alive. I cannot do that from Krull's position. I can barely do it from here. Trenery nodded slowly. He pulled a battered photograph from his chest pocket, a little girl with his eyes and her mother's smile. Emmeline. She turned 4 last month. Whitford had heard about Emmeline many times. Had seen Trenery video call her from a dozen different FOBs across 3 deployments. She had never asked why he kept volunteering for these missions when he had so much waiting for him at home. I joined up because my old man was Army, Trenery said, still looking at the photo. Figured I owed it to him to serve. Stayed because I found out I was good at it. But I keep coming back because of people like you. Whitford waited. People who actually give a damn whether everyone comes home. He tucked the photo away. So whatever you decide to do tonight, I am with you. Even if it ends both our careers. The radio crackled again. All elements, this is actual. Mission is go. I say again, mission is go. Assault element moving to phase line alpha. Through her scope, Whitford watched the first SEALs emerge from the FOB perimeter, shadows moving through shadows toward the valley below, toward the ridge, toward the kill zone. Trenery settled behind his spotting scope. Wind reading is 4 miles per hour, left to right. Barometric pressure, holding steady. Whitford chambered around and began her breathing exercises. Whatever was about to happen, she would be ready. On the ridge above the crossing point, the enemy fighters finished their preparations and went still, predators waiting for prey. The clock read 0247. 13 minutes until the SEALs reached the ridgeline. 13 minutes until everything went wrong. The first shots came at 0302, exactly when Whitford knew they would. She was watching through her scope when the SEAL element crested the ridgeline, 12 figures silhouetted against the night sky for just a moment before they began their descent into the valley. Professional movement, proper spacing, weapons up. They were good. Being good would not save them. The PKM opened up from the eastern position, a hammering burst that shattered the mountain silence and sent tracers streaking across the darkness. A second weapon joined from the western position half a second later, the crossfire pattern exactly as Whitford had predicted. Interlocking fields of fire. No cover for 200 meters. She heard the screaming through the radio before she saw the bodies fall. Contact, 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 someone was shouting. East and west positions, we are pinned down. Whitford was already moving, shifting her rifle to acquire the eastern PKM position. Through her scope, she could see the muzzle flash, could see the gunner feeding belt ammunition while his assistant directed fire. 1,500 meters. Slight crosswind. Uphill angle. Send it, Trenery said, his voice steady despite the chaos bleeding through the radio. She squeezed the trigger. The rifle kicked against her shoulder. A heartbeat later, the PKM gunner slumped forward and the weapon went silent. Eastern position neutralized, she reported. Shifting west. But the Western gun was still hammering, still pouring rounds into the kill zone where the SEALs had gone to ground behind whatever cover they could find. She could see bodies in the open. 2 down, maybe 3. Not moving. The radio was chaos now. Multiple voices overlapping. Someone calling for medic. Someone else trying to establish fire superiority with weapons that could not reach the elevated positions. Krull's voice cut through the noise. Still trying to command. Still trying to control a situation that had spiraled beyond control the moment they crossed that ridge. Overwatch, where's my fire support? Overwatch, respond. Whitford ignored him. She was already on the western position, already calculating windage and elevation. 1,600 meters. The gunner was smart, staying low, exposing only the weapon and his hands. She could not get a clean shot. I need him to move, she said. Trenery was scanning the position. Assistant gunner is behind the rocks. If you can hit him, the primary might shift. She found the assistant, a shadow, feeding ammunition from a crate. Partial exposure. Difficult angle. She took the shot anyway. The round sparked off rock inches from the target's head. He flinched, scrambled backward, and for just a moment the primary gunner turned to look. That moment was enough. Her second shot took him through the throat. The PKM went silent. Western position neutralized, she reported. But the damage was done. Through her scope, she could see the SEALs regrouping, could see the bodies being dragged toward cover, could see the blood black against the rocky ground. At least 3 men down. Maybe more. Overwatch 1, this is actual. Commander Hale's voice, tight, with controlled fury. Overwatch 1, what is your situation? Both primary positions eliminated, Commander. I count at least 1 additional fighting position to the northwest, plus unknown enemy strength in the compound. The assault element needs to pull back and reassess. Negative on pullback. Hale's voice was strained. We have wounded that cannot be moved. We push forward or we die here. Whitford felt something cold settle in her stomach. She swept her scope across the compound, across the rocks, searching for the threats she knew were still out there. The enemy had prepared this ambush carefully. 2 PKM positions were not the whole plan. Movement, Trenery said sharply. Northwest ridge, bearing 325. Looks like a single shooter repositioning. She found him. A figure moving through the rocks with the fluid grace of someone who had done this many times before. He was carrying a rifle, not a machine gun. Long barrel. Optics. Sniper, she said. The word had barely left her mouth when a shot cracked across the valley and one of the SEALs dragging a wounded man jerked and fell. They have a counter-sniper, she reported. Northwest position, engaging. She swung her rifle to acquire the target, but he was already gone, vanished into the rocks like smoke. Professional. He had taken a shot and displaced before she could respond. Whoever this was, he knew his business. Another shot echoed off the valley walls. Another SEAL went down, hit in the leg as he tried to reach cover. Trenery was calling wind adjustments, scanning desperately for the shooter. I cannot find him. He is moving too fast. Whitford forced herself to breathe, to think. The counter-sniper had the advantage of position and knowledge of the terrain. He could move and shoot, picking off the SEALs one by one while she searched helplessly for a target that would not stay still. The radio crackled with Krull's voice, and for the first time since she had met him, he sounded afraid. We're getting torn apart out here. Where's our air support? Soren's response came from the TOC. Closest air asset is 40 minutes out. You need to hold. 40 minutes. The SEALs did not have 40 minutes. At this rate, they would not have 10. Another shot from the counter-sniper. This time Whitford saw the muzzle flash, a brief spark in the darkness northwest of the compound. She swung her rifle toward it, but he was already moving again. And then she saw something else. A figure emerging from a concealed position near the compound, moving toward a vehicle parked in the shadows. Taller than the fighters around him. Different posture. Giving orders. The HVT. He was using the chaos to escape. Trenery, she said. I have eyes on the primary target. But even as she spoke, another shot cracked from the northwest, and through her scope she saw Petty Officer Okonkwo spin and fall, clutching his shoulder. The young SEAL who had looked at her with respect. the only one who had shown her any kindness. Whitford had a choice. Go after the HVT and let the counter-sniper keep killing SEALs, or eliminate the sniper and let the target escape. She had 3 seconds to decide. Whitford chose the counter-sniper. The HVT would have to wait. Every second that enemy shooter stayed alive was another second a SEAL could die. She swept her scope back toward the northwest ridge, searching for movement, searching for any sign of where he had gone. The counter-sniper fired again. The round cracked past close enough that Whitford felt the displaced air brush her cheek. He had found her. Down, Trenery hissed, but she was already pressing herself flat against the rocks. A second round sparked off stone 3 inches from her head, showering her face with fragments. "He has us marked," she said. "He knows our position. Then we need to move. If we move, we lose sight of the kill zone. We lose the ability to support the assault element. If we stay, we die." The logic was irrefutable. Whitford knew it, but she also knew that the moment she abandoned this position, the counter-sniper would have free reign over the valley. More SEALs would die. Okonkwo might die, bleeding out on the rocks while she crawled to safety. The radio crackled. "Overwatch 1, this is actual." Hale's voice was ragged now, exhaustion and desperation bleeding through the professional comm. "What is your status?" Whitford keyed her mic pinned by counter-sniper fire, "Commander. He has our position dialed. I need to relocate or eliminate him before I can provide further support." "Can you eliminate him?" She stared at the ridge where the shooter had last appeared. 1,800 meters, maybe more. Shifting wind. A target that moved like smoke and shot like a professional. The math said it was possible. Barely. "I need him to make a mistake," she said. "I need him to stay still long enough for me to find him." Through the radio, she heard Kroll's voice in the background, shouting orders that no longer made sense. The senior chief had lost control of the situation entirely. His perfect operation had become a slaughter, and he was drowning in it. Then Hale said something she did not expect. "Senior Chief Kroll, stand down. I am taking direct command." Silence on the radio. Whitford imagined Kroll's face, the disbelief and shame and fury all competing for space. Part of her wanted to feel vindicated. Mostly she just felt tired. "Sergeant Whitford," Hale continued, "what do you need?" She thought fast. The counter-sniper was good, maybe the best she had ever faced. He knew how to move, how to shoot, how to use terrain. But he was also confident. 3 kills in 5 minutes had made him bold. Bold men made mistakes. "I need someone to draw his fire," she said. "Give him a target he cannot resist. When he takes the shot, I will have his position." The pause stretched for several heartbeats. Then Hale's voice, quiet and certain. "I will do it. Commander." "No." That was Kroll, his voice cracked and strange. "This is my fault. I got them into this. Let me." Another silence. Whitford held her breath. "Senior Chief," Hale said slowly, "your men need you to lead them right now. I need you to get them to cover and prepare to push when Sergeant Whitford clears that ridge. Can you do that?" Kroll's response was barely audible. "Yes, sir." The radio clicked. Whitford found herself staring at nothing, processing what she had just heard. Kroll had broken. The arrogant, dismissive, certain senior chief who had brushed off her warnings and called her a POG with a rifle had just admitted fault in the middle of a firefight. Had offered to sacrifice himself for men he had led into a trap. She had wanted him humbled. She had not wanted this. "Whitford." Trenery's voice pulled her back. Movement on the northwest ridge. She swung her scope toward the position. The counter-sniper was relocating, a shadow slipping between rocks, looking for a better angle. He was good, but he was also impatient. He wanted another kill. "Commander Hale," she said into the radio, "I need you to move in 30 seconds. Draw his attention to the southern edge of your position." "Understood." 30 seconds. She began her count. Trenery fed her wind data, his voice a steady rhythm against the chaos below. "For miles per hour, gusting to 7. Barometric pressure dropping. Temperature differential creating updraft along the valley wall." 20 seconds. The counter-sniper had stopped moving. He was setting up, prone behind a rock formation, his rifle barrel just visible in the shadows. 1,847 meters. Whitford made the calculations automatically, adjusting for every variable, trusting the math the way she had trusted it 1,000 times before. 10 seconds. She could see his scope now, a faint glint in the darkness. He was aiming toward the SEAL position, waiting for someone to make a mistake. 5 seconds. Commander Hale rose from cover. The counter sniper shifted, acquiring the new target. For just a moment, he was still. Whitford squeezed the trigger. The rifle kicked. The bullet flew. 1,800 meters of mountain air, almost 3 seconds of flight time. She watched through her scope, watched the counter-sniper's head snap back, watched his body go limp. "Target down," she said. The valley went quiet. No more shots from the ridge. No more screaming on the radio. Just the wind and the distant sound of men trying to save the wounded. Trenery let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for hours. That was one hell of a shot. Whitford did not respond. She was already scanning for new threats, already looking for the HVT who had disappeared during the chaos. The fight was not over. It was just getting started. With the counter-sniper eliminated, Whitford could finally do what she did best. She worked methodically through the remaining enemy positions, calling targets to Trenery like they had done 100 times before. A fighter emerging from behind a wall. A machine gun team trying to reposition. A spotter on a rooftop who made the mistake of raising his head at the wrong moment. Each shot was precise, economical, final. The SEALs began to move again. Krull's voice was back on the radio, steadier now, directing his men toward cover with the quiet competence that had made him a senior chief in the first place. Whatever had broken in him during those terrible minutes seemed to have mended, at least enough to function. Whitford watched through her scope as the assault element consolidated their position behind a rock formation 50 meters from the compound. 3 men down and not moving. 2 more wounded, but still in the fight. Okonkwo was among the wounded, his shoulder wrapped in a hasty bandage, his rifle still in his good hand. Overwatch 1, this is actual. Hale sounded exhausted, but focused. What is your count on remaining hostiles? Whitford scanned the compound. The initial ambush force had been decimated, but movement in the buildings suggested more fighters inside. The HVT had disappeared into one of the structures during the chaos. He was still there, somewhere, probably coordinating whatever defense remained. "I count 8 to 12 remaining hostiles in the compound," she reported. HVT location unknown, but likely in the main structure on the north side. Be advised, I lost visual on him during the counter-sniper engagement. Understood. We are preparing to breach. Can you provide overwatch on the northern approach? Affirmative. The SEALs moved like ghosts despite their casualties. Krull had them organized into 2 fire teams, leapfrogging toward the compound, while Whitford eliminated anyone who tried to stop them. A fighter appeared in the doorway and dropped before he could raise his weapon. Another tried to flee through a back window and made it 3 steps before her round found him. It was grim work. Necessary work. The kind of work that visited her in dreams and made her wonder sometimes if the person she had become was someone her father would recognize. Trenery must have sensed her thoughts. He always did. "You know what my daughter asked me last time I was home?" he said quietly, still tracking targets through his spotting scope. "She asked me if I ever get scared." Whitford took a shot. A fighter on the compound roof slumped over the wall he had been hiding behind. "What did you tell her?" "I told her that being scared is not the problem. Being scared means you understand what is at stake. The problem is letting the fear make your decisions for you." Whitford chambered another round. Wise words for a 4-year-old. She's a smart kid. Gets it from her mother. A brief smile crossed Whitford's face despite everything. These moments were what kept her sane. The small human connections that reminded her she was more than just a trigger finger and a scope. The radio crackled. Breach team in position. Initiating entry in 30 seconds. Whitford focused on the northern structure where she had last seen the HVT. The building was 2 stories, mud brick construction, multiple windows that could hide shooters. She would have 30 seconds of chaos once the SEALs went through the door. 30 seconds when anything could happen. 15 seconds. Movement in an upper window. She adjusted her aim. 10 seconds. A figure appeared, rifle raised, looking toward the breach point. 5 seconds. She fired. The figure dropped. Breach, breach, breach. The compound erupted. Muzzle flashes in the darkness. Shouts in Pashto and English. The controlled violence of close-quarters combat, a world away from the precision of her rifle. Whitford could only watch and wait. The SEALs were inside now, beyond her ability to help. All she could do was make sure no one escaped. A door burst open on the north side. 3 figures running, 2 fighters and someone taller between them. The HVT, flanked by bodyguards, making for a vehicle parked in the shadows beyond the compound. "I have the HVT," Whitford said. North side, moving toward a vehicle. 2 escorts. She took the first bodyguard with a shot to center mass. The second grabbed the HVT and pulled him behind the vehicle before she could fire again. They were using the engine block as cover. Smart. Her rounds would not penetrate it. "Trenery," she said. "Range to that vehicle. 1,912 meters. Too far for a reliable shot on a moving target behind cover." And the HVT was about to get in and disappear into the mountains. "Can you hit the tires?" Trenery asked. She could. A man could drive on flat tires. It would slow him down, but not stop him. The second bodyguard was pulling the HVE toward the driver's side door. In seconds, they would be inside. Through the radio, she heard Kroll's voice. "Compound is secure. HVE is not inside." Say again, HVE is not in the building. Because he is about to drive away, Whitford thought. She watched the bodyguard open the door, watched the HVT begin to climb inside, and knew she was out of options. Then Okonkwo's voice came through the radio, strained with pain, but clear. "Sergeant Whitford, north side of compound, there's a gap in the wall. 12 meters west of the main gate. You might have an angle." She shifted her scope. Found the gap. Found the angle. The HVT was visible for exactly 18 inches, a sliver of target through broken brick, 2,000 meters away. "Trenery," she said. "I see it. Wind is shifting. You have maybe 5 seconds before he is in the vehicle." Whitford settled her breathing. Found the gap. Found the target. 5 seconds to make an impossible shot. 2,000 meters. An 18-inch window through broken brick. A target about to disappear forever. Whitford had made difficult shots before. She had made shots that other snipers called luck, and she called math. But this was something else. This was threading a needle at a distance where the bullet would drop nearly 40 feet and drift sideways in ways that calculations could only estimate. She could miss. She probably would miss. And if she missed, everything that had happened tonight would mean nothing. The ambush, the dead SEALs, the wounded, Okonkwo with a hole in his shoulder. All of it wasted because one man drove away into the mountains. Trenery was feeding her data. Wind 4.7 miles per hour, gusting to 8. Temperature 41 degrees. Humidity 18%. Barometric pressure 29.82 and falling. She made the adjustments automatically, her hands moving with a muscle memory of 15 years. Elevation up. Windage left. Account for the Coriolis effect, for the spin drift, for the updraft along the valley wall. The HVT was climbing into the vehicle. She could see his shoulder through the gap, nothing more. "Reese," Trenery said quietly, "that is not a shot. That is a prayer. Then let us pray." She settled the crosshairs on the gap in the wall. 18 inches of broken brick framing a sliver of darkness where her target would pass. One chance, one bullet, one moment between success and failure. The radio was silent. Everyone listening, no one breathing. Somewhere in that compound, SEALs were securing the dead and treating the wounded. Somewhere in that vehicle, a man who had killed Americans was about to escape justice. Whitford thought about her father, a police officer in rural Montana who had taught her to shoot before she could ride a bike. He used to say that the rifle was just a tool, that the real weapon was the person behind it. The discipline, the patience, the willingness to wait for the right moment and then act without hesitation. He had been killed during a traffic stop when she was 17. A routine call that turned into a gunfight. He had saved his partner's life before a second bullet found him. She had joined the Army 6 months later. Not for revenge, not for glory, For the same reason he had put on the badge every morning. Because someone had to stand between the darkness and the people who could not protect themselves. The HVT's head appeared in the gap. Whitford exhaled half a breath and held. The crosshair steadied. In the space between heartbeats, everything else disappeared. The cold, the wind, the radio chatter, the weight of the dead and the fear of the living. There was only the rifle, the target, and the choice. From very far away, she heard Commander Hale's voice. Barely a whisper, almost a prayer of his own. "Sergeant, take the shot." She squeezed the trigger. The rifle bucked against her shoulder. The muzzle flash lit the darkness for a fraction of a second. And then there was nothing but waiting. 2,000 meters. Nearly 3 seconds of flight time. 3 seconds for a small piece of metal to cross a valley, drop 40 feet, drift sideways, pass through an 18-inch gap in a wall, and find his target. 3 seconds that lasted forever. Trenery had his spotting scope locked on the vehicle. Whitford could not breathe, could not blink, could only watch and wait and hope that the math was right, that the wind held, that the impossible shot she had just taken was not a waste of ammunition and faith. The vehicle door was open. The HVT was inside. In another heartbeat, the engine would start and he would be gone. Then Trenery made a sound. A small sound, barely audible, something between a gasp and a laugh. "Target is down," he said. "Whitford, target is down." She did not believe him, could not believe him. She shifted her scope to the vehicle, searching for confirmation, and found it. The HVT was slumped half out of the driver's door, one leg still inside, the rest of him crumpled on the ground. The bodyguard was staring at the body in shock, unable to process what had happened. Whitford put a round through the bodyguard before he could recover. The radio exploded with voices, confirmation requests and disbelief, and someone laughing in a way that sounded like crying. Through it all, Commander Hale's voice cut clear and steady. "All elements, this is actual. HVT is down. I say again, high-value target is confirmed down. Begin consolidation for extraction." Trenery was looking at her with an expression she had never seen before. Something between awe and fear and respect. 2,000 meters, he said, through a gap in a wall. "Reese, that is not possible." Whitford lowered her rifle. Her hands were shaking now, the adrenaline finally catching up, the enormity of what she had just done settling into her bones. "Apparently it is," she said. Below in the valley, the SEALs were emerging from the compound. The fight was over. The enemy was dead or scattered. The mission was complete, bought with blood and luck and one impossible shot. But Whitford could not stop staring at the body by the vehicle, at the man she had killed from 2,000 meters away, at the end of a life that had taken so many others. She did not feel triumph. She did not feel satisfaction. She felt tired. Movement in the valley caught her attention. A figure climbing the slope toward their position, moving with purpose despite the treacherous terrain. Commander Hale was coming to them, coming to her. Whatever he had to say, it could not wait for extraction. Commander Hale reached their position 20 minutes later, breathing hard from the climb, but moving with the determination of a man who had something important to say. Whitford and Trenery were already packing their equipment, preparing for the extraction that would come with the dawn. Hale stood at the edge of the outcropping and looked down at the valley. From here, the compound was a dark smear against the lighter rock, the vehicles still visible near the northern wall. The bodies had not been moved yet. 2,000 meters, Hale said without turning around. Through an 18-inch gap, in shifting wind, Whitford continued securing her rifle case. "Yes, sir. I have been in special operations for 22 years. I have worked with the best shooters in the world. Delta snipers, DevGru assaulters, Marine Scout snipers with more confirmed kills than birthdays." He turned to face her. "I have never seen anything like what you did tonight." She did not know how to respond to that, so she said nothing. Hale moved closer, his boots crunching on the loose rock. "I owe you an apology, Sergeant. You came to me with intelligence that could have prevented this entire situation. You identified the threat. You recommended a different approach. And I defer to my senior chief, because that is what I have always done." Whitford met his eyes. You trusted your team. That is not a failure, Commander. That is leadership. It is a failure when my trust is misplaced. Hale's jaw tightened. 3 of my men are dead. 2 more wounded. Because I did not listen to an army sergeant who saw what we could not. The weight of those words hung in the mountain air. 3 dead. Whitford had not known the final count. She had been too focused on the living to count the dead. Trenery cleared his throat. Commander, if I may. Sergeant Whitford tried to go through proper channels. She brought her concerns to Captain Soren first, then to you. She followed protocol even when protocol was not working. Halen nodded slowly. I know. That makes it worse, not better. He looked at Whitford again. You relocated your position against direct orders. If you had been where Krull assigned you, you would not have had the angle to eliminate those PCAM positions. More of my men would be dead. I did what I thought was necessary, sir. You did what was right. There's a difference. The radio on Hale's vest crackled. Actual, this is Bravo 2. Extraction birds are 15 minutes out. LZ is secure. Hale acknowledged the transmission, then turned back to Whitford. I am recommending you for a Bronze Star for your actions tonight. The counter-sniper engagement alone would justify it. The HVD shot is something else entirely. Whitford shook her head. I do not need a medal, Commander. I need to know that the next time someone like me raises a concern, they will be heard. Hale was quiet for a long moment. Then he did something unexpected. He extended his hand. You have my word, he said, for whatever that is worth coming from a man who failed to listen the first time. Whitford looked at his hand, at the calluses and scars of 2 decades in special operations, at the offer of respect from someone who had every reason to dismiss her the way Krull had. She took it. It is worth something, she said. They shook once, firm and brief, and then Hale turned to begin the descent back to the compound. Whitford watched him go, trying to process everything that had happened in the last 6 hours. Trenery finished packing the spotting scope and moved to stand beside her. That was not nothing, Reese. A SEAL commander apologizing to an Army NCO and promising to do better. That does not happen. Whitford shouldered her rifle case. It should happen more often. They began their own descent, picking their way down the treacherous slope as the first hints of dawn touched the eastern peaks. Below, the compound was coming alive with activity. SEALs securing the site, collecting intelligence, preparing the dead for transport. The dead. 3 men who would not go home. 3 families who would receive visits from casualty notification officers. 3 futures erased because someone had not listened. Whitford knew she should feel vindicated. She had been right. Everyone knew it now. The senior chief who had mocked her, the commander who had dismissed her, the operators who had looked through her like she was invisible. They all knew, but vindication tasted like ash in her mouth. She had been right, and people had still died. When they reached the valley floor, the extraction helicopters were visible on the horizon, dark shapes against the brightening sky. SEALs were loading casualties onto stretchers, moving with the grim efficiency of men who had done this too many times before. Okonkwo was sitting against a wall, his shoulder bandaged, and 4-line running into his good arm. When he saw Whitford approaching, he raised his hand in a weak wave. She crossed to him and knelt beside him. How bad? Bullet went clean through. Missed the bone. Doctors say I will be back to full duty in 6 months. He managed to smile, despite the pain. Heard you made one hell of shot up there. Whitford glanced toward the vehicle where the HVD's body still lay. I got lucky. Okonkwo shook his head. That was not luck. That was something else. He looked at her with those intelligent eyes, the same eyes that had watched her shoot at the range, that had seen what Krull refused to see. I am sorry, he said quietly, for how we treated you, for how I did not speak up when I should have. You were junior. It was not your place. Maybe not, but it should have been somebody's place. The helicopters were landing now, their rotors kicking up clouds of dust and debris. Whitford stood, preparing to help with the extraction. Sergeant Whitford. She turned. Okonkwo was still looking at her. Remind me never to make an army sniper angry, he said. Despite everything, Whitford almost smiled. The flight back to FOB Talon took 40 minutes. Whitford spent most of it staring out the helicopter's open door at the mountains passing below, trying to make sense of everything that had happened. 3 body bags lay in the center of the cabin. SEALs she had never spoken to. Men whose names she had not bothered to learn because she had assumed they would never bother to learn hers. Now, they were going home in aluminum boxes, and she would carry the weight of wondering if she could have done more. Trenery sat beside her, silent, understanding that some moments required no words. When they landed, the FOB was already buzzing with activity. Word had spread about the ambush, about the casualties, about the impossible shot that had ended the mission. Soldiers and support staff lined the path from the helicopter pad, watching as the stretchers were carried past. Whitford helped unload the wounded, then stepped back to let the medical teams do their work. She was covered in dust and sweat, her muscles aching from hours of tension and the long climb down from the ridge. All she wanted was a shower and 12 hours of unconsciousness. Sergeant Whitford. She turned. Captain Soren was standing nearby, tablet in hand, her expression unreadable. Commander Hale wants to see you in the operations center. Immediately, Whitford exchanged a glance with Trenery. He shrugged slightly, as confused as she was. The operations center was quieter now than it had been during the mission briefing. The same plywood walls, the same map tables, but the energy was different. Exhausted instead of anticipatory. The aftermath instead of the preparation. Commander Hale stood near the main display, speaking quietly with someone Whitford did not recognize. A colonel based on the rank insignia, but the uniform was wrong. No branch identification. No unit patches. Just a name tape that read Worth, and the kind of quiet authority that came from operating in spaces most soldiers never saw. Hale looked up as Whitford entered. Sergeant, thank you for coming. She came to attention out of habit. Sir, at ease. Hale gestured toward the colonel. This is Colonel Worth. He arrived about an hour ago from Bagram. He has some questions about the mission. Colonel Worth turned to face her. He was older than she had first thought, late 50s perhaps, with silver hair cropped short and eyes that seemed to catalog everything they saw. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but carried easily across the room. Sergeant Whitford, I have been reading the after-action reports. Commander Hale speaks very highly of your performance tonight. I did my job, sir. You did considerably more than that. Worth moved closer, studying her the way she studied terrain through her scope. The counter-sniper engagement at 1,800 meters. The HVD shot at 2,000 meters through an 18-inch gap. These are not ordinary achievements. Whitford said nothing. She had learned long ago that officers like this did not ask questions without purpose. I have also been reading your service record. Worth continued. 3 deployments. 800-plus hours of Overwatch. Bronze Star from Firebase Keating. And an interesting note about Special Forces assessment and selection. Whitford felt her jaw tighten. That was a long time ago, sir. You passed every phase. Physical fitness. Landnavigation. Team events. Psychological evaluation. You were one of the highest scoring candidates in your cycle. He paused, and then you were disqualified for a minor cardiac arrhythmia that 3 separate physicians have since concluded poses no operational risk. She did not know what to say to that. The SFAS rejection had been the defining disappointment of her career, a door slammed shut just as she was about to walk through it. She had spent years trying not to think about it. That disqualification has been reviewed, Worth said, and overturned. The words took a moment to register. Whitford stared at him, certain she had misheard. I represent a joint special operations unit that recruits exceptional operators regardless of branch, Worth continued. We have been watching your career for some time, waiting for the right moment to make contact. After tonight, I believe that moment has arrived. Hale stepped forward. Colonel Worth is offering you a position, Sergeant. Not as support, not as attached personnel, as a full operator. Whitford's mind was racing. This was everything she had wanted, everything she had been denied, suddenly laid out in front of her like a gift she had not asked for. I need time to think, she said. Worth nodded, as if he had expected that answer. Of course, we are not in the business of pressuring people into decisions this significant. He reached into his pocket and produced a card, plain white with a phone number and nothing else. When you are ready, Call this number. Day or night. She took the card. It felt heavier than paper should. One more thing, Worth said. He glanced at Hale, then back at Whitford. What you did tonight will be classified. The shot, the circumstances, all of it. You will not be able to talk about it. There will be no official recognition beyond what Commander Hale has already recommended. Whitford almost laughed. She had spent her entire career being overlooked and dismissed. The idea of her greatest achievement being buried in classified files seemed fitting somehow. I understand, sir. Worth studied her for another long moment, then nodded. I'll look forward to hearing from you, Sergeant. He left without another word. Whitford stood in the operations center, holding a plain white card, trying to understand how everything had changed in the space of a single night. Hale moved to stand beside her. For what it is worth, he said quietly, I hope you take it. The military needs more people like you in positions where they can make a real difference. Whitford looked at the card one more time, then tucked it into her pocket. I need to talk to someone first, she said. Whitford found Trenery in their tent, sitting on his cot with the photograph of Emmeline in his hands. He looked up when she entered, and something in his expression told her he already knew. Word travels fast, he said. She sat down across from him. Colonel Worth, the guy with no patches and the spook energy. Trenery nodded. I figure he was not here for the scenery. What did he want? Whitford pulled the white card from her pocket and held it up. He wants me. Trenery was quiet for a long moment, looking at the card, then at her, then back at the photograph of his daughter. When he finally spoke, his voice was careful. What kind of one are we talking about? Operator position. Joint Special Operations. The kind of unit that does not officially exist. And your SFAS disqualification. Overturned. She still could not quite believe it herself. Apparently 3 doctors reviewed it and decided the arrhythmia was never a real concern. Trenery let out a slow breath. So everything you have been working toward for 15 years just landed in your lap because you made an impossible shot. Whitford shook her head. It is not that simple. It never is. He set the photograph aside and leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Talk to me, Reese. What is going on in that head of yours? She did not answer immediately. The question was too big, the implications too vast. For 15 years, she had been fighting to prove herself, fighting against assumptions and dismissals and doors that closed before she could reach them. Now a door was opening, and she was not sure she was ready to walk through it. If I take this, she said slowly, we are done. You and me. This partnership. Trenery nodded. I know. 3 deployments. 800 hours of Overwatch. You have saved my life more times than I can count. And you have saved mine. He smiled, but there was sadness in it. That is how it works, Reese. We keep each other alive until we do not have to anymore. What if I'm not ready? Trenery laughed, a genuine sound that filled the small tent. Not ready. You just made a 2,000-meter shot through an 18-inch gap to kill a high-value target while pinned down by enemy fire. If you're not ready now, you never will be. She wanted to argue, but he was right. She knew he was right. The fear she felt was not about capability. It was about change, about leaving behind the only professional relationship that had ever truly worked. What will you do, she asked. Trenery picked up the photograph again. Go home, probably. Emmeline is starting kindergarten next year. Her mother has been asking me to be there for it. He looked at Whitford with clear eyes. I have been saying no because I thought I was needed here. But maybe what I am really needed for is back in Tennessee, teaching a 5-year-old how to ride a bike. You would give up the job. I would give up this job. He shrugged. There are other ways to serve. Training new snipers. Working ranges stateside. Being a father. He paused. You have spent your whole career proving you belong somewhere they did not want you. Maybe it's time to go somewhere they actually want you. The words hit harder than she expected. All those years of fighting, of pushing against resistance, of being told she was not good enough or not the right fit or not what they were looking for. And now someone was looking for exactly what she was. Trenery stood and crossed her cot. He sat down beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. I'm going to tell you something, he said quietly, and I need you to hear it. You're the best sniper I have ever worked with. Not the best female sniper. The best sniper. Full stop. What you did tonight was not luck. and it was not a fluke. It was the result of 15 years of discipline and training and refusing to quit when everyone told you to. Trenery, let me finish. He turned to face her. You do not owe anyone anything. Not me, not the army, not the SEALs who treated you like dirt. The only person you owe is yourself. And you owe yourself the chance to see how far you can go when someone is not standing in your way. Whitford felt something loosen in her chest, a knot she had been carrying so long she had forgotten it was there. She thought about her father, about the badge he had worn and the sacrifice he had made. She thought about Firebase Keating and the Rangers she had kept alive. She thought about the 3 SEALs who had died tonight and the ones who had survived because she had been willing to disobey orders. She thought about the person she wanted to become. Will you be okay? She asked. Trenery smiled. I will be better than okay. I will be home. They sat in silence for a while, 2 soldiers who had been through everything together, facing the end of something and the beginning of something else. Outside, the FOB was waking up to a new day, the sounds of activity filtering through the canvas walls. Finally, Whitford stood. She looked at the white card one more time, then tucked it back in her pocket. I need to talk to someone else first, she said. Okonkwo. She nodded. Good, Trenery said. He deserves to know what he helped make possible. Whitford paused at the tent flap. Micah, thank you for everything. Trenery picked up the photograph of his daughter and smiled at it. Go change the world, Reese. I will be watching. The medical tent smelled like antiseptic and blood. Whitford found Okonkwo in the corner, propped up on a cot with his shoulder wrapped in fresh bandages and in 4 drip, feeding fluids into his good arm. He was awake, staring at the canvas ceiling with the distant look of a man replaying the worst night of his life. He turned his head when she approached. Sergeant Whitford, come and check on the wounded. Something like that. She pulled a folding chair over and sat beside his cot. How are you feeling? Like someone put a hole through my shoulder. He managed a weak smile. Doctors say the surgery went well. No permanent damage. I will be back to full strength in 6 months. Maybe less if I am lucky. You were lucky tonight. A lot of people were not. The smile faded. Okonkwo looked away toward the other occupied cots where wounded SEALs lay in various states of consciousness. Reeves did not make it. Neither did Tomaszewski or Barlow. 3 guys I trained with, ate with, fought beside. Gone. Whitford said nothing. There were no words for this kind of loss, no comfort that did not feel hollow. Okonkwo turned back to her. I keep thinking about what you said in that briefing. About the ridgeline. About the kill zone. You saw it coming, and we did not listen. You were not the one who dismissed me. No, but I was not the one who spoke up either. He shifted on the cot, wincing at the movement. I saw you at the range. I knew you were good. Better than good. And I still did not say anything when Krull shut you down. You were junior. It was not your place. That is what I told myself. Okonkwo's voice hardened. But that is just an excuse, is it not? Junior or not, I could have said something. Could have backed you up. Maybe it would not have changed anything, but at least I would have tried. Whitford studied him for a long moment. The young SEAL who had shown her small kindnesses when everyone else had shown her contempt. The one who had given her the angle for the impossible shot that ended the mission. You did try, she said, when it mattered most. That gap in the wall. You saw it, and you told me. If you had not, the HVT would have escaped. Okonkwo blinked. I was just calling out what I saw. And that is all any of us can do. She leaned forward. You want to make up for not speaking sooner. Then speak from now on. When you see something wrong, say something. When someone is being dismissed because of who they are instead of what they can do, stand up. That is how you honor the men we lost tonight. He was quiet for a long time, processing her words. Finally, he nodded. I heard Colonel Worth came to see you, he said. The guy with no patches. News really does travel fast around here. SEALs gossip worse than anyone. He almost smiled again. What did he want? Whitford hesitated. Then she reached in her pocket and pulled out the white card. He offered me a position, operator slot in a joint special operations unit. Okonkwo's eyebrows rose. That is serious. Are you going to take it? She looked at the card, at the simple phone number that represented everything she had ever wanted. I think I am. Good. Okonkwo met her eyes with an intensity that surprised her. You should. Not because of what you did tonight, but because of who you are. Someone who sees what others miss and has the guts to act on it. The teams I work with could use more people like that. Even if those people are Army sergeants who make SEALs look bad. Especially if they are Army sergeants who make SEALs look bad. He extended his good hand. For what it is worth, Sergeant Whitford, it was an honor to operate with you. Even if I spent most of it bleeding in the dirt. She took his hand and shook it. The honor was mine, Petty Officer Okonkwo. Get better. The Navy needs you. She stood to leave, but his voice stopped her. Sergeant, one more thing. She turned. That shot you made. 2,000 meters through an 18-inch gap. He shook his head slowly. I have seen a lot of things in my time with the teams. I have never seen anything like that. Wherever you end up, whatever unit you join, they are getting someone special. Whitford felt heat rise to her cheeks. She was not used to praise, not used to being seen for what she could do instead of what she was not. Thank you, she said. That means more than you know. She left the medical tent and stepped into the morning sun. The FOB was fully awake now. Soldiers and support staff going about the business of another day in a war that never seemed to end. Somewhere in the distance, helicopters were spinning up for another mission, another operation, another chance for things to go wrong. Whitford pulled out the white card and looked at it one last time. Then she walked to the communications tent and asked to use a secure line. The phone rang twice before someone answered. This is Sergeant First Class Teresa Whitford, she said. Colonel Worth gave me this number. Tell him I am ready. She hung up and stepped back outside. The mountains rose around the FOB like ancient sentinels, the same mountains that had nearly claimed a dozen lives the night before. She had conquered them with patience and skill and one impossible shot. Now it was time to see what else she could conquer. If this story moved you, drop a comment about what resonated most with you. Share your favorite moment or character, or tell us about a time when someone you know had to prove their worth against the odds.